Well, I most certainly can. We're just really
Wonderful.
thrilled to have people joining us today. Although, Duane, I did, now knowing that, I should have asked you ahead of time if it's Wardally or Wardally.
Wardell, you said it.
Wardally. All right.
Wardally.
Well, that was going to be my first guess, but I did not want to get it wrong. So thanks for confirming that. So thanks and welcome everybody to today's session, Cultivating LGBTQ plus and Inclusion in Our Schools with Duane Verdally, who is with us from the Minnesota Department of Education, and he is the LGBTQ plus specialist. And I'm just really looking forward to learning some tools, being equipped to better serve students who fall under that LGBTQ category and support them in any way we can. And so I believe this is the beginning of what we hope is an ongoing relationship around this work. So we really welcome you wholeheartedly, Duane, and thank you for being here. And I'll hand it over.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you. Good afternoon to everybody who's attending. And again, I just want to be um, on one side fairly succinct, and on another side, per Aaron, really open up the door to this being an extended partnership. My name is Duane Wardally. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I am the LGBTQ specialist here with the Minnesota Department of Education. It's a pleasure to be here. And I think about how important it is for us to maybe just set a tone of who is here in this virtual room. We have just about 59 minutes remaining together. And I think what I really would love for us to establish during this time is not only just learning about resources that would be helpful for you, for your pedagogues that are within your site. Perhaps it's colleagues if you are a pedagogue, if you're an administrator, it would be really helpful for you to be sharing with other members of your staff, direct reports. This is also a time to really think about how we are centering the humanity of our students and our staff and our community. That's really a big part of our work. I want us also to be sort of comfortable with ending with accepting and expecting non-closure. We might, be able to begin a really powerful and meaty conversation together via chat and or verbally. And we might not have the time, and that's okay. Because again, I've been able to connect with Lori and today with Dave and Aaron, and I think about how we can partner one-on-one with different school districts and or simply within the space. I see some familiar faces. I see some faces I don't know at all. And so I would be really curious if you are able to jot down in the chat, and you're going to give me until 3 for us to do it all together. We're going to do a waterfall effect just for you to identify your name. Should you want to use your pronouns, your role, and your school district. So again, name, your role, and your school district. So if you don't mind typing that in the chat, don't hit enter yet. We're going to do that shortly. We're going to do that all together. So on the count of 3, 1, 2, 3, go ahead and hit enter. So again, I see that we have again Lori, Director of Professional Learning. Great to see you again here virtually. Aaron, great to see you here virtually as well. If I'm pronouncing your names incorrectly, I apologize. I see Jillian, Director of Special Services for Math and Science Academy. Welcome. Chrisio, School Counselor Chan Hassan. Todd, I see that you are the Special Ed Coordinator at North Lakes. Kate Holtz, I see that you're also Director of SEL over at 917. Aaron, good afternoon. Executive Director, West Central Education District. Michelle Humphrey, hey, I see you. Executive Director of Student Services in Lakeville. I see Sarah, and you're the Special Ed Program Manager at Franklin Academy. Dave Christians, good afternoon again to you. Communications for MASE, and Susan Larson, Director of Special Ed Hiawatha. I see lots of us joining. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Red Lake is here, Director of Special Services. Good afternoon. And Lisa, Executive Director of Mid-State Education District, Little Falls. What I want you to do is just take a quick moment. I'm a transplant here in Minnesota. I've actually been in the state just over 3 years, but I want you to actually just comb through your chat and look at the diversity of districts that are present. So whether it be Lakeville, whether it be Red Lake, whether it be some of our charters that are here within the room, I encourage you to think about where those are located, simply because what I want you to think about is our identities and how we may connect even to the state of Minnesota. So we're all showing up based on our lived experiences, our affirmations, or how some people may not have affirmed us. What does this look like in terms of the diversity in the room? Take a couple of seconds just to think about that. And now I want to ask you a bit of a transactional question, and I want us to do the same thing based on our waterfall effect. What do you expect to take from our minutes together in this space? So don't hit enter yet. But again, I would like you to type what you expect to take away from our time in this space. And on the count of three, just go ahead and hit enter. 1, 2, 3. Wonderful. I'll let you read these on your own. Fantastic. Okay. I just want us to hold those expectations in mind as we proceed through this presentation together. And you might say, well, Duane, I'm looking at your screen, but I'm seeing somebody else's name. That's perfectly normal. I've actually just been in this role for just over 4 months. My predecessor, Jason Buckland, he, him pronouns, he's actually still here at MDE. And I also want to highlight that this work does not live in a silo. This is why I'm really excited to be here amongst a number of you as special educators, admin, pedagogues, student-facing, staff-facing, so that you are cognizant that while I may be the second person in this role here at MDE, we all own this work. I'm a Black gay man. In my bio, you may have seen that I carry quite a few identities with myself. I'm first gen. My parents immigrated here to the United States. I also lived overseas for over 12 years of my formative years. And so I was a language learner as well in my middle school and high school experience in mainland France. I bring this up to say that we do not belong to a box. And so when we go through our presentation over these next 52 minutes, I really want us to hone in on how much intersectionality, and that will be a term that we'll use throughout the year, how much that connects with not just our student experiences, but our staff and our community. Quick check for understanding. How we doing? All righty. I love this. This is great. So I am just going to ask if one of you does not mind reading the beliefs out loud of the center to which I belong, MDE staff member, and the center that I work for is the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Center. So the belief, which is paragraph 3, would anyone mind reading that out loud? Just unmute and go
If
for
you
it.
have to share
Yeah,
your
we do
screen.
not see the screen.
My apologies, and this is why. This is why. All right,
The
no
village, and
worries.
we're good.
Okay, hang tight. We are getting there. All right. One moment. Yep. Yep. How? Nope. Not sharing the right screen. All right.
In Duane's defense, I want everyone to know this was working perfectly at 11:45.
That's correct. Thank you
There we
so
go.
much for bringing that forth. Wonderful. And I also added in the AI feature of just capturing so that you can read along as well. Would anyone like to read the third paragraph out loud? The belief.
I will.
Thank you.
We believe our work is personal and collective, requiring each of us to develop a critical consciousness that fosters beliefs, behaviors, and practices that eliminate harm, values our diverse human experience, and cultivates environments that dismantle racism and all oppressions.
Thank you so much, Erin. I think about what we are here to really center, again, the human experience. We're not only focusing on the liberation of our LGBTQIA plus students, we're really thinking about how, as a system, when we lead and seeing our LGBTQIA plus students, our staff and community, we're really working toward all. This isn't a zero-sum game. It's not one person's oppression over another. And I want to really be mindful about making that explicit because ultimately, as a center, we are eliminating harm, not seeking to reduce, but really that's the end goal we're here to eliminate. In my role as LGBTQ specialist, I will be working alongside multiple other members of the EDI and outside of EDI to think about how we are valuing our diverse human experience. So I wanted to make sure that that was front and center for everybody prior to going in the framework of one of our assistant commissioners, Dr. Makari Trainum. One moment. And we're gonna advance the screen. Here we go. All right. Envision this as a pinwheel on a warm summer day. So not exactly the day like today, not that kind of wind. Imagine a sort of warm breeze. With this being a pinwheel with critical consciousness staying in the center. That's really what we center as part of our work, not just within this PD, but within all. We are here to conceptualize the approach for operationalizing equity, diversity, and inclusion through systems. I may be a part of one system, an ecosystem that's called the Minnesota Department of Education. I've seen that many of you are a part of other school systems. We may intersect as a Venn diagram, and we may come apart also depending on the work that we lead. What stays in the center in our work is critical consciousness. And you can see that as number one, equity is about disrupting mental models and behaviors that perpetuate historical injustices, marginalization, and institutional racism. Diversity is about the conditions that exist for fully valuing and respecting the continuum of the diverse human experience, which we talked about in beliefs. Representation and the intersectionality of both our individual and collective identities are acknowledged. Individual may be that you're in charge of special education in your school district. Collective may be how do you come across within the state of Minnesota to think about how you work collectively for all students within the state. Inclusion, how do we foster a culture of belonging by amplifying authentic relationships and different ways of knowing within and across networks, coalitions, and organizations to hold ourselves accountable to those most harmed by structural racism and injustice. I'll just share that I will share a few resources toward the end of this presentation where I think about that being sort of number three, inclusion, thinking about who owns our work, who does LGBTQ work, and who's sort of like specialist in that work. Today, we're going to really focus on equity, where we're thinking about mental models and behaviors and how we disrupt those. Couple of grounding assumptions. I'll just give you a few seconds to take a look at that before going into this slide of intersectionality. If I could get someone else to read the very wise words of Dr. Kimberly Crenshaw, who has done an incredible amount of academic work to define intersectionality. Just come off mute and go for it.
This is Jalen. I will.
Hi, Dylan.
Hi. The interconnected nature of social categorizations, such as race, class, and gender, as they apply to a given individual or group, regarded as creating overlapping and interdependent systems of discrimination or disadvantage.
Thank you, Dylan. And we are a small group, so I would like to actually take this opportunity to hear from a few of you when you think about the interconnected nature of social categorizations, what may come to mind, given that we're in a space that is discussing resources in the LGBTQ community? So again, what comes to mind for you when you think about the interconnected nature of social categorizations as we discuss the LGBTQ community?
I think about the cards being stacked against someone.
I would love for you to go into detail. So I heard cards being stacked against. So I heard,
Okay. Oh, and
Yeah.
you know what? Sorry.
Yeah.
Because yes, I want to be careful with getting the positive, negative versus neutral. That so let me think about that. So I'm thinking of students who might be dealing with having navigating life with their own neurodiversity, and then also dealing with whether it's their gender identity, or their sexual identity, that one more layer to themselves that could be perceived as away from the norm when we're navigating through the world. And I'm not saying that's right or wrong. It's just we all have to navigate through the world with I'm a old aged white woman. I'm viewed differently. And so it's just navigating the world around other people's perceptions of us, or other people's, and yeah, let's use the word judgment, because I'm very concerned right now in the current political situation. So
Yes.
and I'm a rambler, if you can't tell, so I
No,
don't know if that makes sense, but
I appreciate that, Jillian, and I would love to also hear from two people. And if you see me just like jotting a few notes, I'm just hearing a couple of keywords that I would love to um, summarize and get us into the next space. Who else may want to share? And total differentiation, if you prefer to type, that's fine as well.
Duane, this is Kate. I'll share.
Hey,
So
Kate.
when I think about, hey, nice to meet you. Thanks for putting this on today. When I think about intersectionality, I think a lot about empathy. And I recognize they're two very separate things, but I think that tapping into one's own empathy derived from experiences of prejudice or bias can help one start to wrap their brain around intersectionality. I think it's really important not to gloss over intersectionality as though it's just another form of bias. Like I think, as a cishet white woman, existing in the world, I've experienced misogyny, but I recognize that my experience of misogyny is likely very different from the experience of an Asian woman experiencing both misogyny and racism, or a Black woman experiencing both misogyny and racism. But I think about how your own experiences and your own sense of empathy can really help you tap into what intersectionality might look like or feel like, I guess, for other folks, and recognizing that those of us that come from a place of more privilege really do need to do the work to imagine and put ourselves in the shoes of folks who experience some of the things we all experience when we're othered or belittled, but at different angles and with different amounts of pressure and force.
Thank you for sharing that, Kate. Wonderful. Thank you. Maybe one other person?
As I was listening to Jillian talk about her example, it just made me think about students that when she used the phrase cards stacked against them, right? So if we have a student who is working through some gender identity or their sexual orientation or identity, if you add on top of that, that they not only maybe have a disability, but also come from a place of lower income or their parents don't have resources to support them, or their parents just don't support them, how important it is as educators for us to understand all those different layers and how they intersect as we're looking to provide supports for them, and even how we approach supporting them, because it looks different, I think, for a student that comes from wealth than it does for a student that doesn't, or any of those different areas of disadvantage.
Wonderful. Thank you. And I'm just going to highlight a few themes that I heard again. We did a few norms at the very beginning, and I really want to highlight that we're diving in, which is great. I heard some isolation around race, around gender, around neurodiversity already in the room. And we're sort of just meeting for the very first time, where we're talking about the experiences, not just as adults, but also for our students, based on disability and income status. Something that I think about for myself as I was listening, I also was thinking about how within our systems together in education, either at a federal level in education or a state level or a local school district slash charter, what designations are perceived from a deficit standpoint. For instance, again, I was a language learner for a very good part of my life, learning French from scratch. And I think about some professors, or sorry, some teachers who may have seen me as fully literate in my home language and reading above grade level and saying like, hey, well, I can see how you're going to make strides in X number of time versus others saying, well, no, this is the label. And if this is a label, then how do I perceive you as an adult? So I think about how many good points came up and how we want to use these ways of isolating for race, isolating for gender, talking about gender identity versus sexual identity. We're going to talk about that briefly as well. And I want to just make sure that, again, we're comfortable with non-closure because we have just a few minutes together. This is really a way of opening up the door to deeper discussion. This is for you. Think about 3 identities that are important for you. Why is this important? We talked about a couple of matters with those 3 people who shared out. Not asking you to share those outwardly, but just to hold on to those as you look through this chart. You might say, Duane, there's some identities that are missing. Absolutely. But just to think about some 3 identities that are really important for you to hold. Now, I think about the positionality of this room. So with Lori and with Aaron and Dave being in a space of special educators, I think about what you as leaders in your districts and in your school sites might do to get some critical consciousness flowing in your pedagogy spaces. In other words, when you lead PD, what is it that you might have some of your teachers, pedagogues, non-pedagogues think about when they are addressing their students, when they are meeting with their students, when they're meeting with staff, when they're meeting with families, and how they may not prescribe how to speak to members of our LGBTQ community, but more how do you get really reflective of how you have maybe perceived the LGBTQ community, and how can you be empathetic? I heard that come up in one of the 3 comments. How do you center empathy? How do you unlearn to relearn, which is actually present in Dr. Trainum's framework of EDI work and critical consciousness? Can one person read this first question?
I was trying to unmute. I got it. Can you share a positive experience where LGBTQ inclusivity made a difference in your school environment?
Thank you so much, Michelle. And I think about spaces where, as a district leader, you have members of your district who are special educators who may say, well, I specialize in special education. How is this relevant to my work? Why do I need to focus in on the LGBTQ student community? How many of them are really even in my classrooms? Is this really relevant when I have the READ Act to enact? Just really quick question, based on the Minnesota school survey that was last administered, just about how you want to just type the percentage of students that identify themselves as belonging to the LGBTQ community within our Minnesota schools that have taken the survey. Again, this is a space where we're getting to know each other. It's all about us building a community. Just asking you to guess the percentage of students. Yep. See, 15. Mhm. All right. Wonderful. Thank you so much for participating. We're actually talking about 18% roughly of our students who identify themselves as being a part of the LGBTQ community. And again, I think about the members who you influence as leaders and how you get your leaders to think critically about belonging and inclusion for students who, by way of our systems, have been excluded and oppressed. I use those two words very intentionally, excluded and oppressed, inside of our school systems and outside. What are the values that exist in your community that will be important to uplift as you are working to create inclusive school environments for LGBTQ students, families, and staff? That's another example of a question. Can somebody read the third question?
Have you encountered any challenges in implementing LGBTQ inclusive practices? How did you overcome them?
Thank you so much, Dr. Robinson. And I might want to hear just from one or two persons before going into a video to kind of get again, our room thinking. We heard from 3 people earlier, maybe some other people, perspectives, 1 or 2 people. Does anyone want to speak to question 3 about challenges in implementing LGBTQ inclusive practices?
One challenge that we faced last year had to deal with a student, junior, who was working on their transition. And so they were identifying at school by one name, by one pronoun, and mom and dad were not in the loop at that point. And as we do, counselor was encouraging and helping to facilitate a plan to involve parents. That the student had opted not to do that yet. We were getting closer to that. And then one teacher accidentally outed the student in a parent meeting. And so it challenged then, and is the parent coming to terms with this and the frustration that the school went ahead and allowed the student to identify as they did without letting the parents be aware. By the way, we did not perform a sex change operation at school by any regard. So, but, and yeah, it was the parents actually were quite lovely as we worked through conversations. The student is served in special education, but extremely high functioning. And so, but definitely a challenge.
Thank you for sharing that. And some things that I wanted to highlight, where I'm thinking about some intersectionality in your roles. Show of hands of how many people are special educators in this virtual room. Oh, wow. No way. Okay. So I think about how confidentiality plays into your current roles, right? And how often you may, based on a student's IEP, change an evaluation in their IEP, new evaluation, reevaluation, how many times we need to communicate across teams, departments, and also even non-pedagogical staff, right? So that we ensure that as a team at a school, we're all on the same page about a student. I heard in there was um, again, it was not intentional, right? And I also heard that there was space to allow for the parents to be parents, and also that it was a space that was sort of like welcoming and inclusive to the student. Um, I want to, in this next video that we're going to watch by Alok, don't know if a few of you may have heard of Alok. Alok was actually just in Minneapolis last month at the Uptown Theater. Alok does not only really deep professional development as a person who is involved in LGBTQ civil rights. It's also a person who does comedy and is able to approach the perspective of being an influencer from a outspoken role with civil rights, but also from a role in comedy. And I say this to say, how do we make sure that we are appreciating positive spaces? We may, as adults, assume, I heard judgment come up in one of the first spaces where we had feedback, that parents with X background will not accept their child. Parents with Y belief system will not accept their child. And I think about in this next space, what happens when we do make a mistake. And we'll also talk about the importance of why we do this work. And ultimately, again, that this is not a zero-sum game of prioritizing my gay identity above my Black identity. Because guess what? They're both my identities, right? And I think about your students, especially you being experts in special education. Check for understanding. How we doing? We're at just about halfway point, right? Technology, work with me. I'm going to move this to this screen. Can we see this? So I actually need you to say it because I can't see
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
All right,
Got it.
wonderful, wonderful. So I am going to play 2 minutes, and this is Alok and this Man Enough podcast, and just quick spoiler alert, we're going to talk a little bit about pronouns, or Alok will talk a little bit about pronouns, and I just want you to jot down what resonates with you from your perspective, from your role, and or from your lived experiences at your school district slash site. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and play this now. It'll be just about 2 minutes.
Still find myself sometimes feeling nervous because I don't want to mess up or hurt you or say the wrong thing or feel like I'm taking away from your identity by calling you a he. And so I'm just wondering, do you feel people being nervous that they're going to say it wrong? This is a 101 class for listeners because because I noticed I felt nervous and I didn't want to make you feel bad. And so I apologize if I did. I tried to correct it right away. But for anybody who's listening who maybe has never been around a gender nonconforming person, because there's way too many people that haven't. I'm just curious. So that's kind of where I wanted to start.
Sure. I guess I would say welcome to the awkward choreography of being a human.
Yeah.
We're always going to mess up
Mm.
because we are indoctrinated into a world that teaches us ideology, not compassion.
Mm.
So it's not you speaking when you misgender me, it's everyone that has spoken to you before. And in my life, what I always try to remind people is I was not born with gender literacy. I was born hating myself and hunting myself. And I had to learn too, so other people are going to have to learn. And if that way, I think trans people can actually teach the world transition is possible, not just between genders, but between paradigms.
Mm.
It's so possible to learn and constantly be learning. And in fact, learning is the most delightful thing about being alive. So what I say is when you mess up, which is when you're alive, because being alive is about messing up gloriously. And I will fight for that ability to gloriously mess up, because I don't believe that humans are statues or sculptures. I believe that we're inconsistent and idiosyncratic and hairy and fat and unfurling, and that's what's joyous about being alive. What we do then is say, I'm sorry, I'm learning, it won't happen again. And then if it happens again, I'm sorry, I'm going to try even harder.
Mm.
And that's what love is for me, trying harder for each other.
I will let you gather your thoughts. You might have jotted a few things down, and maybe you need a little bit of processing time. While I do that, I'm going to drop 3 links into the chat just in terms of resources. I don't want that to distract you. Or some of you might say, I actually process better with distractions, like myself. But I'm going to drop 3 resources in the chat. I just want you to process and write down a few things, or maybe one thing that resonated with you, because those 2 minutes were deep. So take a couple of seconds. Just wait a minute. Uh-oh. Oh no. Here we go. Let's hear from at least 2 people, 2 or 3 people. What's coming up for you?
I just have to acknowledge their lovely comment on welcome to the awkward choreography of being human. Um, I recently, with a staff member, unintentionally misgendered. I used a she pronoun in an email, and it should be they. Former English teachers also struggle with they, because that is a originally was plural. So but I felt badly and apologized, and then continued to learn, oh, that's a mistake I can't make. So I appreciated this video. I'll leave it at that, Duane.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. And I also just want to highlight, for those who don't know Alok, just a few things about Alok. Indian American, parents in the academia world, grew up in Texas, just as a couple of different intersections that make up Alok. 1 or 2 other people. What's coming up for you?
I'll just share if I may. I just thought about the grace and the feeling of someone saying to you, that's okay. And what you're saying is really what's been spoken to you before, right? Because I think we do see systemic, like familial presentation at time, right? It's what you've learned growing up. It's what you, and that's what you're bringing forward. I just think the grace of saying, and then agreeing, just saying, I'll do better, just owning that and saying, I will do better, and then actually doing better. But I just thought the grace behind that of saying, I understand, and it isn't you, but it's who was speaking to you before. So I loved that.
Thank you, because I heard pressure come up before in one of the comments, and I think about where some of us as leaders and or of your own direct reports may say, I need to get this, I need to have this perfect. I need to be perfect in my understanding. I can't make a mistake. So hearing Alok's perspective and also being very clear about not accepting people who are intentionally misgendering, misnaming. Maybe one other person? Oh, sorry. Thank you, Christopher, for sharing that. Stunningly meaningful and beautiful. Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
Alok's final comment about, isn't that what love is doing better for one another? That really like hit my heart.
Thank you. Thank you. And I just want to like do a quick pause where some of you might say, okay, this is great. I'm feeling good. Wonderful. All right. Loving community. This is wonderful to do this for 41 minutes, but like I'm wondering what I'm taking from this training. Earlier, we talked about what you expected to get from it. I am increasing our consciousness of not just where we may go as adults and our learning about our LGBTQ community. I also want to humanize our community. And Alok is we're talking about gender nonconforming as a term that came up in the video. And I think about how many terms within the LGBTQ community have been weaponized for decades. I also think about recently how members of our community have been weaponized, right? And what that means when a child who maybe has been super enthusiastic about showing up to school, whether that child is 7 or 17, they're children, right? What does that mean when you are going to a familiar space and now Alok talked about learning to hate himself, learning to hate themselves, right? And what does that mean? This is one of the charts that to me means a lot. And should we do any one-on-one work together? I think about how we go from 3rd grade to 12th grade. Just take a quick minute to take a look at this chart. My elementary friends, it's maybe 23 degrees and descending, at least here in the cities. Kids can still go outside for recess. And at 3rd grade, what comes up with bullying behavior and how does that tie to my identity, to Alok's identity, to other members' identities in the LGBTQ community, and what happens when we do not interrupt and or disrupt. I had a really interesting comment by a school administrator who talked about racial slurs. And I said, well, I wonder what happens when we do not interrupt LGBTQ slurs, and if a child may feel it is permitted to then also go to racial slurs. So again, not a zero-sum game. This is not one versus the other. I think about how this work that we lead, and I say we because again, you might see Jason and internal equity work, myself and LGBTQ work and or other colleagues, we're all doing this work together. How do we get from bullying to homophobic bullying, from homophobic bullying to sexual harassment to then teen dating violence? We're going to just skip ahead and go to gender across the world. I love this map. It's from PBS. And actually PBS has a whole documentary on gender and how gender is seen via multiple lenses, how there are multiple genders in multiple societies. We are here in Minnesota, where within our groups of indigenous peoples to Minnesota, we have Two-Spirit people who are very much a part of the for centuries. Two-Spirit people who are very much a part of society, who have been accepted, who have been seen as um, integral to society. This map shows you in how many different places across our world we do not have a two-gender binary. And in another space, again, we have 14 minutes. We can go into how gender as a social construct has been imposed via colonialization, via multiple means of colonialization of slavery in multiple nations and regions across the world, to one believing, like here we have our kids showing up, 2024, to believing that the world must be seen by a binary. So I'm sort of leaving that there, accept and expect none closure, where you might say, hey, I want to go more into depth. While it being from a PBS report, I really, really, really want us just to center per this post that you can see that, again, Indigenous peoples have long lived outside of the Western gender binary system. So when we think about our students, when we think about our parents, when we think about our communities, and when we think about our lovely staff who want to get it right, a big part of getting it right is also learning and being exposed to different perspectives and what may it look like as we seek to increase humanity, to unlearn and relearn. Local, state, federal protections. As we talked about matters being political and or members of the LGBTQ community being um, dehumanized via a number of explicit being dehumanized explicitly. I'll leave it at that. I really, really, really want to highlight that my work at the MDE lives under the Safe and Supportive Schools Act. This is not new. Spoiler alert, this is not new. Shouldn't say many, some may tell you that this work is new. This came under Governor Pawlenty in 2014. Safe and supportive schools, like there's nothing that is revolutionary, nothing radical, nothing bad about loving every one of your students and providing spaces that are intentionally, by Minnesota state law, present to embrace all students and to create safe and supportive environments. You're in special education. I think about how many times our students in special education may also be stigmatized. How is it that, again, our schools and our adults are building that inclusive space for all students to be acknowledged and heard and loved? These are federal acts, Title 6, 504, and the Title 9 acts. But just for Minnesota, the two that I would lean into, and literally here, Google is your best friend. If you go to the Minnesota Human Rights Act and to Safe and Supportive Minnesota Schools Act, you'll notice that Minnesota, amongst all states within the continental United States, actually has some of the most progressive laws to protect and see all of its students, staff, and community members. So this is not new. I just want to highlight that. It protects our LGBTQ community as it protects our communities of color, as it protects our special education students. And I could go down the line and talking about members who have been oppressed within our systems. Just going to leave this here briefly. This is a resource from transstudent.org, and you will find this gender unicorn in a number of different resources. We're going to dive into 3 resources shortly. Not going to go into depth because you can look at it on your own when you are in one of our resources, like Listen, we'll talk about shortly, when defining gender identity, gender expression. My elementary folks, raise your hand, and or those who work with elementary school. Again, I'm just tapping back into the comments that I heard earlier about where we are, where our students are in this time, and wanting to show up and feeling really at danger at showing up. And we'll see another short clip of Alok talking about, quote, feeling like a glitch in the system. And I think about where we are right now in December 2024. Michael Hall, that story in the middle, has a beautiful story. I mean, I've read Julian as a Mermaid, love it. And in part, it's in New York City. Okay, so I just want to highlight that it is a beautiful way of a child connecting with their grandmother. Love it as a story, and I think it could be even read by adults to really just look for that core meaning. Red being a crayon that colors blue, and thinking about how our students perceive what they perceive when they look at a crayon, when they look at Julian, right? That's at the elementary school level. And I would simply say that there are lots of books, lots of ways in which your students can simply understand that life is not about prescribing prejudice based on one's preconceived notions of who one is. With that being said, I shared the GLSEN resource earlier. I'm just gonna share this page. Can you see this? A quick yes? No?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Sorry. Each time I do this, I can't actually see the screen with you. I simply want to highlight this is an organization that the MDE works with, that multiple school districts have worked with and continue to work with, that has been around for 34 years. Where GLSEN believes that every student has the right to a safe, supportive, and LGBTQ inclusive K-12 education. You might say, hey, that sounds a lot like safe and supportive schools. Well, guess what? There are some states where there is not that level of state support. And again, GLSEN is there to supplement. We have the fortune of being able to work with them all while our laws here and our policies here do also support our students. This is another resource that I shared in the chat. It's the Minnesota School Outreach Coalition that just had QQuest. Really quick verbal check for understanding. Does anybody know what QQuest is, and or did anybody go to QQuest? And it's fine if you didn't. It actually is a conference. They have a high school conference and they have a middle school conference. I was fortunate enough to attend the middle school conference this year. Over 1,000 youth participating. It's not only just a space to be safe and free and liberated. There are breakout sessions where students participate all together and they meet each other across different school districts. We even have students who come in from out of state, from Iowa, North Dakota, South Dakota. I'm just putting this as a resource because while QQuest just took place, the Queer Youth Prom is coming up in April. And again, this is an organization that has worked with a number of different states, and notably within the state of Minnesota. So as you think about your high school students, what is it and where is it that they can fully be? And what is a resource that might be life-changing in terms of really having the safety to show up as they are? I am cognizant of time, and I just want to play one quick minute from this video of Alok that to me is really powerful. We're gonna then spend the last 3 minutes just wrapping up, maybe getting one or two viewpoints or standpoints from each of you as participants, and then sharing some next steps with our members from MASE. You can hear me, right? Is that a yes? Okay,
Yes.
perfect. All right, thank you. All right.
Was feminist and anti-racist and very intellectual. It was the kind of place where when I was younger and had any question about the world, my parents would say, here's a book. So I had this permission from a young age to have points of view and hot takes. But then that same self-assertion that was celebrated within the confines of my family, I felt punished for in school, where conformity was kind of prescribed as the only way to get by. So I think as a young person, I was confused because the parts of me that were most dear and most magnificent were often the parts that got me most in trouble.
Like how?
Like, I feel like from my earliest memories, discrimination was kind of atmospheric for me. I felt like no one ever allowed me to come to my own gender and sexuality by myself. It was through slurs from other people. This constant wariness around my safety, physically and otherwise, created the conditions where I felt like I had to continually shapeshift and hide in order to not draw attention to myself. So like deepen my voice, be really intentional about how I walked, how I moved, because the insinuation back then was if you were queer whatsoever, then you were a glitch, something that needed to be removed. I remember
fixed.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm gonna leave that there. And if one or two of you want to perhaps just share, maybe something came up for you.
A few things that came up for me was, as a woman of color, this is how many groups identify people of color. It is also how they view our students who have disabilities. So, and I'm always cognizant whenever I open up a meeting, we do a land acknowledgement, but we talk about the implicit biases. We have already added it to some of our families, our students' bibs, because as they're growing up, behavior intervention plans, as they're growing and learning about themselves, it is making sure the adults are aware that yes, going back to what one of the members said, we mess up, but we have to continue to intentionally fix our way of addressing and viewing our students and staff members. So a number of things came up for me. I'm sorry that I'm not able to unmute my video because I keep
Fine.
every time I try it, I can't see everyone's face. But those
It's
are the
fine.
things that came up for me. I'm sorry, Mr. Ward.
No worries. Thank you, Dr. Robinson. Perhaps one more person before we wrap up, and I hand it over to our folks at MASE. And if not, I simply want to highlight that this, again, was us opening a door to our work. And this is one of many different presentations. Please understand, I would love to continue not only the work with MASE, but I think about you as individual school districts / charter schools across the state. So it truly is an honor to be in the space and to also have space where you are engaged, because we have kids and adults and community to protect and to center and love. So I want to thank you, and I'll just gonna hand it over to our MASE facilitators. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Duane. It was wonderful to get to have the opportunity to listen to you. I'll say again, because I got to hear you in August. One of the things I would ask folks for as they complete that evaluation for Dave, if you are interested in continuing the conversation, if there are areas that you'd like to explore further, please put that in the notes. I'm going to just put that out there in the space for right now, because I'm thinking of one of the comments that Dustin had earlier. 31 years ago, I started teaching 4th grade, and I was nervous about reading a book called My Two Moms with my 10-year-olds because I was worried about the response of the community. I have to say, I would be more worried reading that book in the same community today. So I love the resources that Duane shared. I get to read them with 4 little boys at my house, and they think they're great. But I'm wondering if that might not be an area that we want to explore, because I think as you focus on the special education world, what can our general education colleagues be doing to create that already safe and inclusive space for all children? So just my thoughts as we go out there. But thank you so much, Duane, for working with us on this. I know it's been a little bit of a process to get this to happen, and so I'd love to keep it going. So thanks to everybody for being here today.
No problem. Thank you all so much. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Duane.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care. Thank you.